Hello everyone. If you are watching this video, then I imagine more than likely you are someone that is already familiar with my channel, probably already a subscriber. And if that is the case, then you almost certainly have watched my videos because of the content being related to Lost. I'm sure it's abundantly clear by now that I am a huge Lost fan, and making content about Lost was definitely the primary motivation behind me starting this YouTube channel. That said, I've always wanted to keep the door open for the possibility of me making videos on other topics, specifically other stories that I am also very much a fan of. And one of those stories is the Saw series. Most of the fandoms, if you will, that I belong to are pretty standard stuff. The one that tends to get the most eyebrow-raising reaction is the Saw films, and that's because they have a certain reputation. Some of which I think is fair, but a lot of it I do not think is fair. Similar to Lost, there are a lot of misconceptions about the Saw series. And specifically, I'm talking about the original run, which is basically the first 7 movies. In fact, a big reason that I'm making this video specifically is because very much of what I love about Lost is the same stuff that I love about the Saw series. There really are a ton of similarities that I don't see discussed too often. I don't know how much of an overlap there is between fans of the two series. Both series started in 2004, the fall of 2004, and both of them ended in 2010. So they both ran for those 6 years. I was always very blown away by a lot of the things that these two stories that I was following at the same time had in common. Without getting into spoilers, I'll give you some examples. Both stories absolutely revel in nonlinear storytelling. They jump around in time. Every season of Lost, you get more pieces of the puzzle, and to that end, both stories really play around with the idea of perspectives. You'll see certain events in a certain context, but then as the story goes on and you get more information, it just recontextualizes things that you've already seen before, and it completely changes what it means. Also, both stories start with a man waking up in an unfamiliar situation, and he's not sure how he got there or what's going on. And, obviously we, the audience, don't either. That's just another weird little similarity. Anyways, I want to get into the similarities they have as far as their reputations. So Lost, I've done a whole video on Lost and how it has a reputation that I feel it does not deserve. And I feel like most people that have actually watched the show from beginning to end also feel it doesn't deserve. Saw's reputation does have some interesting similarities with Lost's, but it's a bit different in the sense that it gets lumped in with some of the other horror franchises that have just gone on and on and on without there really being much of a story, especially not an overarching story. You look at most slasher movies like Friday the 13th, the Halloween movies, many of them, they don't have much of a plot beyond, okay, there's a killer going around killing people. That is absolutely not the case with the Saw films. In fact, the films are so interconnected that it's almost to the series' detriment. Don't get me wrong, that is absolutely one of the reasons that I love the Saw films, is because of how interconnected they are. But the problem was that with these movies being released once a year, most people weren't doing what I was doing, which was rewatching the previous entries before going to the theater and seeing the new ones. I feel it's accurate to say that most people that bought a ticket to a Saw film, in the late 2000s, had only seen the previous entries once at most. I mean, I know there were people that I hung out with that went and saw, the new Saw movie, but they hadn't even seen some of the previous ones. But yeah, for the people that had seen all the previous ones, they hadn't seen them recently. So they just had a kind of vague memory of what had come before. And again, without getting into spoilers, which is a little tricky, that often meant that they would watch the new movie and have no idea what was going on in a lot of the plot. So it became very easy for people to walk out of the theater being very unsatisfied and, just kind of shaking their head like, what the hell did I just watch? And that's the thing that makes the Saw movies so unique, is that aside from the first two movies, the Saw films were not good standalone films. But when viewed as episodes in a miniseries, if you will, that's when they actually become much more interesting. There is an overarching narrative that gets revealed piece by piece, that with each installment gradually reveals itself, and you get a better understanding of what the story is about. And again, if you're watching this, then you're probably a Lost fan, and that should sound familiar to you because that is very much what Lost did. The difference there being that most people at least acknowledged that you were supposed to be following along with Lost, that you were supposed to be keeping up, that it was an overarching story, that you couldn't watch a new season without having seen the previous seasons. Whereas because the Saw movies were released as films in theaters, most people didn't view them that same way. Now, the big similarity that these two stories have, as far as the reputations go, are their endings. Once again, I've talked before about how the reputation that Lost's ending has is unfair and unearned, in my opinion. And in my experience, everybody that I have shown Lost to has come away with a very positive reaction that absolutely contradicts the reputation that the ending has. Saw's ending has a similar reputation. The difference is that in Saw's case, I actually do think this is a 100% earned, valid, and in my opinion, accurate reputation. The first 6 films in the original 7-film series were far from perfect, but when viewed as episodes in a series, they were telling a very compelling, very interesting story. And after the 6th one came out, they had announced that the 7th one was going to be the last one. And the penultimate installment, that being Saw 6, set up the finale in a really cool, really interesting way. And then, unfortunately, there was a lot of behind-the-scenes drama, which I will probably talk about in the future in another video. But for now, let's just say that there's a lot of behind-the-scenes reasons that Saw 3D, which that right there probably tells you one thing, ended up being a terrible movie, for one, but much worse than that, it was an absolutely atrocious conclusion to the series. People like me that loved the series for the story were completely let down. It only seemed interested in the gore aspect and not at all resolving the story or the character arcs that people like me had become invested in the first 6 installments. And that's just one of the biggest reasons that I was so disappointed in the last Saw film. I was so disappointed, in fact, that my 19-year-old self decided to handwrite my own version of Saw 7. And then about 3.5 years ago, the movie Jigsaw was coming out. And it was basically, I don't know if spin-off is the right word, but the idea is that it was returning to the Saw universe, and it wasn't a direct continuation of the story that had concluded, 7 years prior. Instead, it was meant to be like a reboot of sorts. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I was actually really excited about it because the directors that came on board had directed one of my all-time favorite movies, and that is Predestination. If you haven't seen that, check that out. But also because all of the marketing for that movie, like the posters, the website, and yeah, the trailer, all of those things made the movie look really good, in my opinion. So yeah, I was really hopeful that the series would kind of be redeemed in a way from the terrible ending. Unfortunately, I was severely let down yet again. In my opinion, that movie is about equally as bad as Saw 3D was, but for completely different reasons. And it was experiencing that disappointment all over again that reminded me that I had done this. And I went and dug it up. Like, I didn't know where it was. I had to go looking for it. And I found it, and I read it, and it is really, really bad. Some of the ideas that I had were pretty solid. There were things that I expected of the ending to Saw that I still feel is what we should have gotten. And yeah, it was in here. It was just poorly written. The dialogue specifically, no good. But I decided that I wanted to do it again. I was 19 when I wrote this. And, at the time that Jigsaw came out, I was 26. And I felt pretty confident that my writing had improved substantially. Not that that's saying much, to be honest. So I started working on a new Saw 7 rewrite. And like I said, that was fall of 2017 that I started working on that. Basically, it became an annual tradition around Halloween where I would rewatch the Saw movies, and my interest in finishing this rewrite would come back up. And so I would start working on it again. And within the first couple of years of me doing that, they announced that they were going to be trying again to sort of reboot the Saw series, this time with an idea that Chris Rock came to the studio with, that apparently they were all very excited about. And that film is now due to be released in the middle of next month, on May 14th. It's called Spiral from the Book of Saw, and it stars Chris Rock along with Samuel L. Jackson. And if I'm being honest, I'm cautiously optimistic about it. But when they first announced that this movie was coming, I decided I wanted to finish my Saw 7 rewrite before Spiral is released. And for a long time, it has been my intention to eventually share the completed script with other Saw fans that were also disappointed in the finale that we got. So what I've decided to do in the weeks leading up to Spiral is release videos on each of the first 6 Saw films, in which I will discuss some of the things that I feel are often overlooked about the series, kind of explore how there's a lot more going on beneath the surface than most people realize, specifically the more casual viewers, and kind of just go over what I feel the series was about and why that was compelling and what I felt was owed to us in the conclusion. What I felt needed to be addressed and resolved. So yeah, my plan is to release one video per Saw film for the first 6 films, and then that will lead into me releasing my Saw 7 rewrite. Now, that currently exists in the form of a screenplay, but what I'm planning on doing is taking that script and turning it into a video where basically the image of the corresponding character is displayed on screen while I show you the written dialogue that that particular character is meant to be saying at that time. It'll probably also include establishing shots of the sets that, already existed within the first 6 films. And I plan to set the whole thing to music from the Saw series. So the viewer will still be reading the dialogue and the scene descriptions, but with added visual and audio cues. My thinking is that this will be a slightly less tedious, more atmospheric way of experiencing the story than just reading the script. That said, if anyone is more interested in reading the script instead of experiencing it in that format, I will also be making that available as well. So yeah, this video is meant to be an invitation to people that follow my channel, but have done so specifically for the Lost content and may or may not be familiar with the Saw series. I would like to invite you guys to watch the Saw series, and after each one, watch the video that I've made on that particular installment. So for example, you'd watch the first movie, then watch the video that I release on that first film. My intention is for the first half of that video I make to only talk about that with no spoilers for the films that come after. And then the second half of that video you can then come back to later, because that second half will go into that film's place in the overarching story. I'll obviously clearly indicate at which point that you should stop watching if you haven't seen the rest of the series. But yeah, basically if you join me in doing that, we'll watch the first 6 films, and then if you've never seen the 7th one, great, don't watch it. I'll probably do a video on that eventually, but not in the immediate future. I would actually prefer input from people that watch 1 through 6 and then experience my version of 7. Now, I realize a lot of people probably won't have any interest in this. In fact, I imagine a lot of those people aren't still watching at this point. But if you are still watching and you do feel like you're not interested in watching this series, I understand, no worries. If it's because of the gore aspect or even the horror aspect of the series, I would say that, in my opinion, they're more of thrillers than they are horror movies. And as far as the gore, if you've seen something like Game of Thrones, for example, I really genuinely feel that the violence in the Saw films isn't as graphic as it is in a lot of like premium cable television shows these days. But yeah, if it's not your thing, it's not your thing, and that's fine. I would just ask you to ignore the next several videos that I will be releasing in the first half of May. Please don't unsubscribe, because I promise you it won't affect my Lost content. I will still be doing at least one Getting Lost video a month. In the case of May, it will just be one. I won't have time to do more than one. But I will still be doing the follow-up videos on the 1-year anniversaries. So yeah, May will have 2 going back videos and 1 Getting Lost video. Please don't let my Saw videos scare you away from the channel. I'm not suddenly changing what this channel is all about. I just wanted to take this opportunity to do a little series on another story that I am also very passionate about, the way that I am with Lost. And if you do decide to join me in watching these films and maybe even checking out my Saw 7 rewrite, I do feel it is worth noting that there are, depending on how you're going to watch the films, there are different versions out there. Now, I strongly believe that the director's cuts of each of the first 6 films are by far the most superior versions of each movie. That said, it can be tricky to find and tell the difference between those. I own this complete collection on Blu-ray. Yeah, it has the director's cuts for all of them except for the third one. Like, the third one's the unrated version, but that's not the same thing as the director's cut, which is why I have that on DVD, because to my knowledge, the last I checked, you can't get Saw 3 director's cut on Blu-ray. But I imagine anybody that's going to be new to this series isn't going to be watching it on disc anyways. And I do know that on HBO Max, they have the Saw series on there. But what you have to do when you click Saw, or you click Saw 2, Saw 3, etc., you then have to go down to extras, and there it will have the director's cut available. Now, if you do watch these on HBO Max, Saw 1 has, instead of the director's cut, it has the extended cut, which is a weird combination of the theatrical version and the director's cut. For that first movie, either way will suffice. There's not enough. I'll go into the differences in that first video on that movie. And then, yeah, for Saw 2, 3, 4, and 5, HBO Max does have the director's cuts available if you just go down to extras and click that instead of, the regular one. And then Saw 6 has the director's cut in the extras, but I looked at it and it is not the director's cut. The things that are worth watching about the director's cut of Saw 6 are not in what they have labeled as the director's cut, nor is what they have labeled as the theatrical cut the version that is ideal. Regardless, I will be addressing what the differences are between those cuts in each of the videos. So my point is, try to watch the director's cuts, as they are better. But if you can't, I will be going over what the little differences are between the versions. But okay, guys, thank you for sitting through this. I genuinely hope that some of you will decide to check these movies out, either for the first time or to check them out again, and watch my little series on them. And then, yeah, if you find my, reviews and analysis of the series as a whole worthwhile in any way, then it is my hope that you will check out my Saw 7 rewrite. But all right, guys, thank you for watching this, and I hope to see you in the Saw videos. But if not, I will be back with more Lost content very soon.